Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Of everything you ever were afraid of.
I'm scared to close my eyes. I'm scared to open them.
Now clear your minds. He knows what scares you. It has from the very beginning. Don't give it any help. It knows too much already.
We have such sights to show you.
It's gotta be exactly in the middle.
The candelabra.
It's so fancy. I'm Oliver.
I'm Peter.
And this week we got a special treat for you, the fan favorite, Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
Which is great.
It was great. There's so many layers. So many references.
It's if you're gonna do a parody like that, well done. Just
Exactly.
so.
And at the beginning, you don't even, if you didn't know, you wouldn't think it was the first. So like if you break it up into 3 acts,
Yeah.
the first act, it could be another scary movie, right? Another horror movie.
Yeah, well, that's the cleverness of it, is that it hides a horror movie within its own meta narrative. So it's just great for that. I think they cast it really well, and I think it's genuinely well acted on both fronts, both by the office workers and by the people who are in the horror film itself. So, I mean, if you live under a rock and you don't know about Cabin in the Woods by this point, it's a meta spoof parody. What would you call this? It's comedy horror.
Yeah.
But it's actually more, I would say it's more horror than comedy.
Yeah.
But it's got really good comedy in it, because the concept is horrific in that it's like a ritualistic sacrifice process.
For sure. But then all the reference, it's all this pop culture mixed in.
Exactly.
And that's half the fun. It's just like, hey, that's from that thing, or
Exactly.
oh, that's referencing that, and some of it's kind of like vague. Where it's like, is that thing? You know?
And almost like some things that are completely almost new and made up, like the Merman. Like,
Sure.
Is that from something, or is it just I can't pick it out? I've seen a lot of horror movies. I can't pick that one out.
I'm sure there's a horror movie
I'm
about
sure,
Merman,
yeah.
and we should probably know.
Maybe it's referencing something like
The Merman. It's probably a movie called The Merman.
I imagine it's out there, but it's probably like a creature from the Black Lagoon or something like
exactly.
that. I don't, because I didn't really see like a fish man in there anywhere.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's just clever. Like that is the best part of the movie, seeing all of the monsters at the end, and it's funny because they're like the Walmart brand of it, because they can't get the rights to have all of, like, they can't have Pinhead, so they have like Sawhead, and then they can't have Anaconda, so they have the Cobra. So
then they had that list, where it's like, oh, but I said zombies. Like, but no, not just any zombies. These are, hillbilly zombies. It's so... so self-aware.
Yeah, it's like Scream. Where
sure,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, that's probably its closest comparison. Besides, perhaps Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Right.
You haven't seen that one?
No,
yet.
I haven't. And like,
I've forced you down your throat so much.
You could say scary movie, but that's just so the other way.
Yeah, it is.
But I think Scream's a good. If Scream was a comedy as well, it's
Scream's like. It's funny.
Yeah.
But it's more... That's what I mean. It's like there's horror comedy, and then there's like more horror than comedy.
Sure.
And that's kind of where this lands in, is that, I think it's more horror anyways.
Yeah.
And,
no, definitely.
And like the gore is good in it too.
Yeah.
And that's also, again, where it separates itself. And there's like
where it's still true to the genre while still being funny, right?
Yeah, and it's well acted.
Yeah.
We've got Mr. Hemsworth.
Yeah.
Who's a very fun part of it. I mean, it's just interesting to watch. You look back on that, and it's a great time capsule of what's to come.
Because 2010?
I think that's it, yeah. Probably correct that if I need to, but yeah. I think
Yeah.
2010 is correct.
And like written by Josh Whedon and Goddard.
I don't remember who
Directed
else wrote
by-
it. I should have looked a lot of this up before we sat down, but I didn't. So we're guessing.
That guy.
That guy. I'll just I'll dub it over at the end.
He's done other stuff after the fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know it's those two. And if you look at the cast, you got like actors who have worked for Whedon,
Well, and it's great too because I watched the making of this and didn't see who directed it for Oh yeah, we have phones. I forgot. We have superpowers. But yeah, it's just great because there was so much love and like thought that went into the whole thing too. Because you can set out to make a parody and then it becomes kind of like a scary movie or something like that.
Right.
Where it's fine, and I thought the scary movies were funny, but they're also, they don't treat the genre as well as this does.
Yeah, there's respect.
Yeah, exactly. You know? And it's such a good callback, and especially for people who love horror movies, this is a horror movie for them.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what Scream was too. And it's also, you know, it does serve its purpose of being sort of saying, hey, let's maybe switch up the next few movies that come after this, which is what Scream kind of forced you to do.
Exactly, which, like, you know, we just pointed out, zombies. Not just zombies.
Yeah.
You know, it's like not just a scary movie, like, and like, do you think about it as like, is this what it needs? Hillbilly zombies? Or is it like, are we going too far?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
have
we lost our way with horror? Like,
and I think,
which I think we did in the 90s. You know?
Yeah, well, and I think during the 2000s, like, there's a big argument for that being lost as well. And they even kind of, it's almost like a callback to the last 10 years. Like, you know, Scream separates, it's a marker and it separates everything that came before it.
Right.
And whereas making fun of all the sequels and all of the, and everything, and all the stupid choices you make in horror movies. Same, like this one does the same thing, because like...
with the knife, and then they zap her, so she drops the knife.
Oh man, and it's great though.
Why did you drop the axe or the shotgun? Like...
Well, it's so clever though, because it really, there are problems with the genre repeatedly. Like it seems horror goes in these huge ebbs and flows where it's like it gets these great heights and then these horrible lows, and its lows are usually just it's devoid of imagination.
Yeah.
Which is one thing you can't say about this. It's great imagination. And it had a lot of material to work with, but it also took its material and did something very new and interesting with it. So, you know, it's cool to see. It's just cool to see people put that much thought into a movie. And that's sometimes what's lacking in a horror movie too. The Cabin in the Woods type movies can be lacking in imagination.
Sure.
Or they can be great.
Exactly. Yeah, like, well, if you Cabin in the Woods, if you, other than Scream, like the more visually and like the props and stuff is like The Evil Dead.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And both the original and the remake are exceptional movies. Yeah. You know, and they very much parallel Cabin in the Woods in a lot of ways.
Well, you got the trap door.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the stuff just chasing you in the forest.
Exactly. The hillbilly zombies.
The reading
of
the
Latin. Yeah. Don't read the Latin. Read it. And I love how the stoner's the only one who's like kind of aware of what's going on the whole time. And his weapon is
he's the bong.
The telescopic bong. And a certain part of it almost plays out Scooby-Doo-ish.
Sure, yeah. Well, he's definitely Shaggy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they kind of have their mystery machine.
You just broke the glass for me. Like, why did that not click while we were watching?
I think that is almost the point of a lot of horror movies, is that Scooby-Doo was like this winning formula where you have all of these characters. Like a Jughead comic as well. Or
you got the goof, you got the pretty one, you got the smart one.
You kind of got the lazy one, you got the jock, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's typecasting, but in this case it's for a purpose, which is interesting, because they take them and they have them as sacrificial beings, which are these archetypal characters. They're not maybe archetypal, but they're...
Well, they are. In the genre, they are.
Yeah. And even within the last 100 years, we've kind of developed this character set.
Sure.
Where it's usually a group of 5, and I think it's typical not just for horror, but for a lot of other genres as well.
Yeah.
It really stands out in horror.
If you look at a school, those are the same kind of like cliques you'll get.
The Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much like... Did you ever watch The Breakfast Club?
A long time ago.
I've watched it a lot. Did you watch it after Pitch Perfect?
No. But I guess those characters then make it relatable, and
exactly.
Then you can like put yourself in their position and empathize, and then then it affects you even more, the movie.
Well, it's interesting too, because a lot of the times I think people like horror because it is accessible. in its own way. Like some of them are simpler. The concepts of horror movies are simpler, so I think a lot of people like that accessible part. But I think the problem is what makes a good horror movie is something that's a bit more cerebral. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot of these kind of lower made movies that aren't good. And I would say a lot of the ones, even in my own favorite series, like The Nightmare on Elm Street, for instance, it's great, but it devolves.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. And even, just the fact that they're so old, The Cabin in the Woods almost like forces your hand to make something new.
Yeah.
And same with something like Scream when it came out. It calls for something more to be made.
Right.
Because when you think about what comes before Cabin in the Woods, if it is 2010. Yeah.
Sure. And it's Drew Goddard.
Use your magic powers.
So I was close. It wasn't Goddard. Yeah. It was Goddard.
But the last 10 years of horror was hit and miss.
2011.
Okay. So what comes after Scream and between that and Cabin in the Woods is the torture porn genre. And then it's the Japanese remake what would you call it? Bonanza,
sure.
For lack of a better word. And then
now it's about like emotions and states of being,
And yeah, it's definitely the powerful emotion era. I like this era.
Same here.
This era is great. And watching, the highlights really have been anything made by Ari Aster. And
as of late,
the Babadook was great. Yeah. And, depending, I think that one was a little bit more polarizing between people, but I think it was great.
I thought it was great. I think as an Australian, it wasn't marketed well there.
Right.
We didn't take notice until the Australians, didn't take notice until the whole world classed it as a masterpiece almost.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah.
And then you claimed ownership.
And then we claimed it. It's like, there's a problem there with the film industry, but
we'll see how this does.
Maybe that's another podcast.
Australian cinema is coming out in a strong way, though.
It is, and our thing has always been horror, but we don't typically recognize it till after we test it on everyone else and be like, do you like it? Oh, you like it? We love it. We made that. Yeah. Shut up.
That was that. And this one guy who had no one behind him. He makes their movie and is pissed about it. Well, Relic was another one that came out, and you watched that one. You didn't like that one as much, but it was somewhat regarded.
No.
It was.
As a horror film, no. As a film, I thought it was okay.
Yeah, it was more of a drama in its own sense, and it would have been. This is just a horror person in me talking because it was marketed as a horror movie,
right?
And I think it plays out as one would.
It didn't. Sure, I don't disagree with that.
It just didn't go as far as it could have, and it didn't have. Usually, what a horror movie involves is anthropomorphizing your creature, or like turning an emotion into a fiend or an object. But theirs was literally more of a metaphor of the decay of the house.
Yeah.
I thought it was really well made, well acted, well written, and all of those things.
Yes.
But the concept wasn't carried out to the full extent that it could have.
Yeah, I just didn't feel it, and you could blame my speakers at home, even though they're not that bad.
No, and I we just need to always watch things at Jaden's house.
Surround sound's the way to do it.
But I think Australian cinema will head more in the horror direction. I hope they do, because there's a lot of interesting cultural variation in Australia, and different it's you almost get the British stiff upper lip, which is kind of the brash baldness of Australia, and you get something that is entirely its own, where it's kind of crazy. I don't know, but it's a great combination, it seems, for horror writing, and it seems unique as well. And
definitely, yeah. You can almost tell when it's been.
Yeah.
Cabin in the Woods, not really, because Josh Whedon has just such a you can kind of tell it was him too.
Yeah.
It looked like you were watching Buffy at the start.
Yeah.
No, you can typically tell. I can typically tell anyway.
Yeah.
If you compare things like let's just say the Babadook and
Hereditary.
Hereditary.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Hereditary.
No, Relic.
Relic. Okay.
They're comparable in terms of how they're filmed and.
Yeah. Even
and
how
the
they're
mood.
acted.
Exactly.
Where it's
Well,
there's kind of this great tired despair.
yeah.
So, which is interesting. I don't know how that plays.
Well, I think because Australian films typically don't have a big budget, you really have to lean into the acting, right?
Right.
And the filmography, right? Like the camera techniques and all that.
Yeah,
And the arts and the art style.
Yeah, because they're usually quite beautifully shot.
Yeah, because you can't afford CGI and
No.
big props. And
Well, and maybe that's actually why it works so well with horror too, because then you're not CGIing your monsters.
exactly.
Because even
Exactly.
the Babadook is stop motion and
Exactly.
and costume design.
Yeah.
And Relic as well. I think was large. There wasn't. I think there was some CGI, but it looked largely practical.
Yeah, exactly. It's the crazy looking lady. and stuff.
Exactly.
But
But Cabin in the Woods, it's interesting because they have to use a lot of CGI in it, but it's
just so
fine.
bodacious there.
Yeah,
that's
it's
great. Like you couldn't do it, and it holds up ish.
I think so. It's
Yeah.
fine. Like I don't think it was ever given a budget that was like. It's funny because this past week when we watched Lord of the Rings, CGI is great in it. The only things,
On the third one,
the only two parts that don't hold up.
green clouds that are meant to be
that
like.
was one of the two.
Oh
parts.
god, like that was the best part of the book, and it's green clouds that are just like, like fuck off. Sorry. That's
I
why.
agree.
That's why the third isn't the best to me, even though it should be.
The first one's my favorite.
Exactly.
And Helm's Deep. Oh my God, Helm's Deep.
How do you even rank them? Like the first
I really-
one and two.
The first
comparable.
one is so. The more you understand about that time it was written in and made at, but
Sure.
not the movie, but the book.
World War One and
And even then, when it calls back even further in time,
Right.
when you're, because Tolkien was writing with C.S. Lewis, so you have like the biblical structure within it as well.
Right.
And I swear this podcast is still about Cabin in the Woods, but it's really interesting because it hits something deeper. And the first one in particular, because there's so much intimacy between the characters, is emotional. It's just it honestly drew
Sure,
a
especially
lot
at
of
the end
emotional
there.
reaction. Yeah.
yeah.
And and
Okay. The relationships
exactly.
and the character development definitely in the
But
first
I know
one.
what you mean though. CGI does draw you out of it, and I think the two parts in Lord of the Rings are probably the Ghost Army or the Army of the Dead, and
Yeah.
then the Troll at the one part in the first movie doesn't. I mean,
In the first
you can tell.
one- Oh, when they're fighting them in the caves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Moria.
Moria. Sorry.
But-
should know that.
Yeah, I'll forget Joss Whedon's name, but I'll never forget about Moria. But I do like that they at least put a lot of thought and effort into designing their characters. Because in the behind the scenes thing I was watching, they had miniature designs, and then they had as much practical as they possibly could.
Right.
As in when someone gets gored by the unicorn, it's somebody who's holding a unicorn head on a stick,
Sure.
stabbing this guy. So in as much as they could, they used costume design, but it would have been so hard to do that
The up close,
practically.
well, the hillbilly zombie family.
Yeah, they're fine.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Like really awesome.
And like they're comparable to blanking on the Deadites. Evil Dead.
Yeah.
They're very comparable to that, and you know that's just the hallmark of them holding true to the genre as well. Is creature design, and they were the primary antagonists.
Right.
So they did put a time into that, and even the final scene when the ancient one sticks the hand up, even though it does look CGI,
Yeah, it looks
because
good.
It looks good.
There's a way to do it right.
And nothing looks bad. That's the thing
Sure.
and because you're suffering the nostalgia of what each of them is, you're just kind of excited.
Yeah.
You know?
And like how are you supposed to like practically make like these are all different monsters from so many different like origins all at once. Like
Well,
so
and-
I'm not saying like CGI shouldn't be used.
No,
But-
I think you have to at a certain point. But there's some things that are egregious misuses of CGI.
Like green clouds that are meant to be ghosts. Skeleton army.
Are you gonna sit there and make the costumes, Peter?
Yes. I know how to use glue.
You could just appropriate a whole bunch of skeletons from somebody. Are you using these graveyard people? Yeah, and it does. Bad CGI really does take you out of it, and you know usually, and I think why it's so hard here is usually those movies have light and shadows to kind of hide the CGI when it's lower budget.
Right.
So say you have Anaconda. I mean, Anaconda doesn't look great, but let's say Anaconda, because you have the Amazon to sort of hide your snake a little bit, so it blends in, and so you're not seeing the full effect.
It only gets really bad once it's like
in the light.
Yeah.
Because these are under fluorescent lights.
And vomits John Voight.
Yeah. Oh, that accent. Do you remember his accent in that? It's a made-up accent.
Well, he has already got a weird accent. You know?
But it sounds like this.
Maybe he had a stroke.
I really want to... Yeah, he sounds like a southerner who's had a stroke, who's also been drinking a little bit. It's kind of Tommy Wiseau, where you're trying to guess what this is. Like, what came together to make this thing.
But it had iced tea.
I love iced tea, but... You know what? Anaconda's fine.
Oh, yeah.
It's a fun movie.
I've seen it at least 3 times.
Yeah, it's fun. And, like, for those movies, some of them are just shit. Like, they're just purely shit. And that one's not. I think it's still fun to watch. I mean, it's amongst the only ones that I like from...
Of that
genre. I love the Meg.
What
though.
about the Yeah, the Meg.
The Meg was great.
Lake Placid was alright in memory. No, it doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up. Oh, damn.
We should watch Lake Placid.
Okay, it doesn't hold up. Have you watched it recently?
Some parts of it are fine, but it's the writing.
Is it?
The writing is hard to listen to.
Okay.
It sucks.
Okay.
And it's
like crocodiles from China. Come on, it's gonna work.
They had a lot of stuff in there. Concept was great. Betty White's in it.
Is she still alive? She is, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, everybody.
She's older than White
I think
Bread.
there was a Twitter panic recently because Betty White was trending on Twitter, and everybody's like, "Did she die?" Nope, she's still alive. Still trending. Betty White's still the most relevant. Who died recently that was really sad?
Alex Trebek.
Oh
and
yeah,
Sean Connery.
Those are both big losses.
He's the best Bond, in my opinion. Or at least equal to...
I mean, Alex Trebek was the best Jeopardy host. His was genuinely sad because it was pancreatic cancer that he was fighting for so long. And because I was such a huge fan of Jeopardy.
Right.
I watched with my mom, and my mom always won.
The mom's the smartest person on the planet, right?
Yeah, about there. Smarter than I'll ever be. But the cabin in the woods.
well, this is the thing about the cabin in the woods. It's got so many layers that you can like branch off.
Yeah.
But it does it in such a way where it's not convoluted and like it does it it sews everything so nicely.
Yeah. It's just fun to talk about, and it reminds you of so many different films at the same time, even in how it plays out. So it's so fun to watch them just going into the basement, because how many horror movies start with that thing? So they're in the cellar and they're reading the Latin and they're like playing with different things that are reminding you of the puzzle box from Hellraiser or the conscious merman that never appears. But it's cool to think about that, and it reminds me of like a few movies that I would appreciate going back to watch, and that's another thing too, is it just makes you think of it makes you think of the whole genre.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. I thought about Drag Me to Hell when I was watching it. I thought about The Evil Dead a lot, obviously. Yeah. That's the most obvious, I think.
Yeah. There's throwback. There's nods to The Shining, to like
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Texas Chainsaw the
Harbinger,
the zombie guy.
Yeah.
Because he looks like Leatherface, and although he has a manual saw. Not a chainsaw. Yeah, well, and like even the ancient one is like H.P. Lovecraft, like
right, yeah,
the great old ones. And
yeah, and that is something.
Sure, Cthulhu was in there somewhere.
Yeah, Cthulhu's always somewhere, all tentacly and.
And there's throwbacks to some games like Fear and so many, man.
Yeah, well, and even just the way it plays out with the gas station attendant, the Harbinger is cool.
Always.
Because there's always a gas station attendant or somebody who points you on the road. Maybe you could even think of Wrong Turn.
That, if anything, that's the one that you're going to think of, right?
There are so many of those movies. I think there's 6 Wrong Turns.
Yeah, I've seen 2.
I think I've seen 1 and 3.
Which one's the one with Jennifer J-Lo?
J-Lo in one?
I'm sure she's in one.
Oh, yeah. She's... in a later one, I think.
Is it? Might be 3.
It might be 3. Because it's like a game show. It's the game show one, right? Yeah, I don't know.
So long ago.
And
no, not a game show. I don't remember a game show.
They blend together.
Is there one
badly.
with He's won awards.
Sure, Jennifer Lopez is in that. Use your superpowers.
And there's another what's he? My superpower of IMDb.
Yeah, IMDb.
I know it's a podcast, but like.
Sorry, everybody who's somebody
This
out there is screaming into the night. She's in 3.
This is a podcast for the average horror fan.
Yeah,
We're just average guys talking about horror, you know.
Yeah, we're definitely experts. We have a booth now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I mixed up Elijah Dushku.
Okay, I knew Elijah Dushku was in that at least. And who is the boring guy in it? The lead.
Jeremy's sister?
No, I don't know him from much else.
Hold on. I'm sure Jailer's in one. She's probably not.
I don't think she is. I can't remember. J-Lo has been in a few horror movies, which is great. She was in...
Oh, where she gets like hung from hooks and stuff. No. Yeah, with Vincent D'Onofrio.
Use Google
Really
powers.
weird.
Or use Bing. And get there a little slower.
Okay, so Jailer's not in none of them. What am I thinking of? Where she's on the road and something happens. Anyway, what are we talking about? J-Lo.
Stop talking about J-Lo.
We're actually looking it up. You can edit this out.
Yeah, well, I won't. I'm lazy.
The Cell.
The Cell.
And Anaconda.
I know she was in Anaconda.
That's right. Yeah, with Ice-T.
We should just do a podcast about
But The Cell, I
J-Lo
remember
and
The
horror.
J-Lo horror.
That would be great.
Jorah. I'm sorry.
Forget J-horror. We'll do J-Lo horror.
I thought that's what it standard for.
I think, like, with Cabin in the Woods, what... when you look back on that era of horror, what kind of did you gravitate towards?
That era? Like 2011?
Between J-horror, torture porn,
Oh.
and...
There's a lot of remakes. They did a Jason one.
Yeah, that's right, because they did Friday the 13th remake. And...
Yeah, which I thought was okay.
Yeah, because that was the one where he was the survivalist, basically.
Right.
Like he was out in the woods.
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest Jason fan, to be honest. I've recently watched some of the original ones, and as much as I want to like something, I really like Halloween. I think it's great, and I really like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think it's one of the best.
Right.
I don't see the same thing in Friday the 13th.
Right.
I watched a couple of old kind of slasher ones, Prom Night,
Right.
Friday the 13th, and it's fine. I understand that they're the bedrock of the genre, but when you compare them to what else was coming out at the time, when you compare Friday the 13th to Nightmare on Elm Street, it's not even close.
Right.
You know, it's obviously way different budgets, people who had different credentials and everything, but and I understand why people fell in love with Jason, because it was the creative kills, which was the cool part, and
Yeah.
it's an iconic look. It's a great villain in its own right, but it's almost like more visually cool than what I like about horror, and maybe that's why I've never gravitated towards that.
Right.
Because even with Halloween, there's just more lore, I think, and I also think with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's got this whole thing around it that's
It's based in some reality too, right? So
yeah, well, it's the strangest movie to ever watch, especially once you start reading some of the academic papers that have been written about it. It's overwhelming how complex people think about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And fair enough, I didn't quite get that the first time I watched it, but they're like, oh,
definitely didn't.
It's this fairy tale that plays out wrong, and it's all about Middle America failing and stuff.
I get the Middle America part.
Yeah.
But the fairy tale?
It's supposed to be some sort of inverted fairy tale, and it almost plays out like Alice in Wonderland with like the tea party scene and stuff, where it's the dinner scene, and it's, you know, it's American Family gone wrong.
That's the Middle America part.
Yeah,
right?
that part makes a lot of sense to me, because it's about a family of cannibals.
Yeah.
And it's American, because it's one of the very few and first horror movies that actually sets Americans as the villains.
Right.
Because typically before that you'd have
the Brits
well,
or the Germans.
Well, yeah, well, you had someone else.
Yeah.
You know, it would be, you know, a European villain like Frankenstein or Aliens was a big one, or science being the enemy.
Science is the enemy.
Science was a big enemy for a while. Well, and
a Republican made that movie.
Written by George M. Night.
M. Night. Yay or nay?
Oh, M. Night.
This is still about Cabin in the Woods.
It's not anymore. We've drifted.
Okay, well,
Cabin in the Woods.
Different podcast.
The point about talking about Cabin in the Woods is it is literally about everything.
Everything, exactly.
So everything's fair game. Problem solved. And it's M. Night Shyamalan. I like that he tries for something different.
I generally say yay. Is it all yay? No.
It's an unenthusiastic yay.
Yeah,
yay.
it's a yeah.
All right, I'll watch this. There's some great stuff mixed in with some bad stuff.
Yeah.
Because, and it's...
Sometimes he just doesn't hit a homer, you know.
No.
He gets to third base, but that's it.
Well, after The Sixth Sense...
I liked Split and...
Split's fine.
Unbreakable and all that.
I liked Signs quite a bit.
Signs was fine, yeah.
Until the end.
What's the one with...
The Village?
Marky Mark.
Oh, The Happening? The plants are killing...
This is happening. It's happening.
This is happening.
It was just, you know, it's a 6.
It's a 6?
It's a 5.
That's a generous...
0.5.
That's a 2. That's a 2. That one was really well regarded by Roger Ebert.
Huh.
He said, this might not be for everyone. Because it's stupid, but it's fine. I don't care that it's bad because it's original.
Sure.
And I will say, I don't care if your horror movie's bad as long as it's not generic crap.
Sure.
You know, pandery stuff. Because another thing that was mixed into the 2000s were the cheap teen horror movies.
Yeah, like the Final Destination. Although I like
Final Destination a lot.
1 I liked, 2 was okay. The rest
I like 3 a lot
because it was overdone by then. You know.
I like 3, 5, and 1.
I like 1 and 2.
No one likes 4.
Mostly because I didn't watch the others.
Well, there's is Final Destination 3.
Jeepers Creepers, you know, like...
That's a shame about the person who made those movies, though.
What happened?
They were a pedophile.
Oh, were they?
Yeah.
Oh, well, let's scratch that.
Yeah. He goes in the Roman Polanski pile.
All right.
But, I don't know, it's just... yeah, like, it's a weird 10 years of horror. I liked Saw, almost all of them.
I liked... Again, I only watched the first couple.
Yeah.
And I tend to do that with, like, when it goes on like that.
Yeah. It is hard to honestly stay focused. And I would like to watch...
Except for the Screams, I watched all of them.
Which progressively also get worse.
Yeah.
Because once you do that once, it's kind of hard. It's lightning in a bottle. How do you recreate that? How do you recreate Scream? You just don't do it.
Well, they tried, I guess, with, like, I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh, yikes. And those
See, that's the kind of, like, that was just before all that,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Before Cabin in the Woods. Teen slashers.
Yeah, exactly. I think the 90s were fine because you were still working with a lot of practical effects. You were working with a lot of...
But you couldn't take a lot of them seriously.
No, that's the thing. And they don't... You know, you have even Poltergeist, which would be...
As a kid, I was terrified.
Yeah, and it was that way, where it was terrifying in almost the way that Indiana Jones kind of was, where it was... Yeah. Kalima.
That, as a kid, that scared me.
Temple
With the
Doom.
heart, I'm just like, holy shit.
The monkey's brains and stuff. Yeah. The eyeball soup and the chamber with bugs in it. Yeah. I thought I'd have to go back and watch, actually.
Yeah, it's actually it's my favorite one.
I really like the what am I trying to say? Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, yeah, The Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Raiders of the Lost Ark. There we go.
Yeah. That's the first one. Yes.
I'll have to go back and watch those because I think they're another series that really holds up well.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Even though technically you could say he was pointless in the whole thing.
Arguably, yeah.
It all would have happened anyway.
What are you gonna do?
No, I'm a big fan of all 3 Indiana Jones.
Yeah, the 3 Indiana Jones films are great. They're almost as good as the one Matrix film. But they can't.
Two Matrix films.
1.5.
Sure.
Tops. I can't believe they're doing another one.
Are they?
I believe so. They're always. It's like they're always talking about it, and it feels like a threat. It's like they're always threatening to ruin your favorite movies. So I don't know. And it's comforting that you have to have movies like these. And horror does this well because it's an equalizer. It's the equalizing blade that's like, shut the fuck up and make something new. This one, I mean, it doesn't do the same thing quite that Scream did, where it was kind of a middle finger to the genre for it being so repetitive and unoriginal. But it is saying, we've done this. This is iconic. And
things did change.
They did.
I don't know if
They
really
changed.
felt it like you did with Scream, you know.
I think Scream was really...
Because Scream was iconic. It's like...
Yeah, it closes the chapter.
Yeah.
Because after that, you can't make stuff in that same way. Now, can you still do that now with this? Like after Cabin in the Woods? I almost say you can't.
Sure.
Or maybe you could. You'd have to do a different take on it because I
think since then we've had... You know, you just named the torture porn.
Yeah, exactly.
The emotional stuff and what was the other one?
J-horror.
J-horror, these things did happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think some of it did start before it.
Well,
but
I think that's where Cabin in the Woods...
It's been evolving.
Yeah, well, it exceeds
quickly.
the criticism of Scream in a sense because it applauds it in its own way, I guess. Not that Scream doesn't, because it is an homage in its own right as well, but this is much more of a celebration, it feels like, of the genre, as opposed to a criticism. But I think it also does close the chapter, maybe not eternally on this, but
for everything up to the point.
Exactly. Yeah. And in particular, even the Japanese class that's in it, it does call it the J-horror, exactly. So... it does close the chapter, and I think it opens it to another new one. It's 2030. It'll be cool to see what we get, because you do get one of these almost every 10 years. Sure. Well, I mean, there's only been 2 of them, but I'm counting on one every 10 years. An iconic movie that caps it off.
What do you think is next then?
After
immersion, states of immersion, and
this is a great time in filmmaking, so it's hard to say. And I think you'll see 3 things emerge. I think you'll see a lot of films that are social-oriented struggles. So you'll see a lot of the Peele-esque movies where you're going to Get Out and Us. I think he'll continue in that vein. Mm-hmm. And kudos to him. He's a great filmmaker. Mm-hmm. I think you'll also see the reemergence of the zombie genre because...
It hasn't even gone under yet, I think.
No, well, it has ebbs and flows, though.
Sure. And throughout the decades, sure. It's never gone away.
No.
I'm just thinking, I'm pretty sure The Walking Dead's still going, and you got, other things
Sure.
There's a bunch of other ones on Netflix, The
Walking Dead is its own zombie of itself.
Yeah.
It's
played out.
It's played out.
And it should have ended in the 5th season.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Brevity is a great thing. That's why The Haunting of Hill House.
Haunted house, or...
Ooh, yeah. More haunted houses.
Well, you could say that it has reemerged.
Yes. I would...
With things like that and, The Conjuring.
There you go.
And, which... Fuck, I love The Conjuring.
It's great, yeah. More Patrick Wilson. I love you, Patrick Wilson.
I got pretty close to him once.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
Not sexually, though.
You weren't in The Watchmen with him on his little ship? Well, Leonard Cohen sang you guys into a lovemaking, mist-inducing scenario.
In a flying giant owl.
Weird scene. I still love that movie. I love the comic so much, and I like the movie as much.
Right.
I think the comic's better, obviously.
Sure.
But
No, it's great.
Yeah. But
so yeah, we've already got haunted houses and done really well.
Yeah.
Like really well.
And again, even The Haunting of Hill House is emotion based. And I think that's kind of...
Sure.
I
It's
think
mixing all these old and new things, right?
Yeah. Well, horror movies have kind of been aiming at your emotions for the longest time, but now they're really getting in depth with it. And I think that's great because I think it's almost experimental over the years, and I think it's built. You know,
so you kind of have to have those bad decades or those bad films. Like, you know, we could shit on all these movies in the past, but without them, you don't get the evolution of the genre.
And you also enjoy them as they happen. I think it's very much like comedy where there's eras, you know, and the language of film changes as well. So you have things like, you know, Rosemary's Baby, which is effective and it's a great film, but it's not as scary as it once was because at the time, outright terrifying, right? And if you showed somebody The Haunting of Hill House at that point, you would have killed them. You know, it's just too much because it's so real. It feels very real,
Right.
and it's just the language changed so much, and what they're exploring has evolved. I even just think how people analyze themselves in this day and age. We're very self-reflexive, and you think about what's going on in your own head a lot more, I think. And, you know, even just with the addition of the social comparisons that we make with ourselves now in the world we live in. You know, there's so much that you compare yourself against that it somewhat makes you reflexive. So I wonder if that's triggering it. Because there's, interestingly enough, something that's usually triggering brands of horror movie. As in the torture porn genre. I think a lot of that actually had to do with the Bush administration and kind of the crackdown on a lot of things and the overly conservative era. Like whenever you get an overly conservative era, you're going to get this horror genre swinging back hard. And so you usually get some pretty extreme films made during those times.
Right. And, you know, we've watched a bunch of things where, you know, the war in Vietnam had definitely influenced it heavily. And it's very evident when you watch it. You know?
Well, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Night of the Living Dead, those people were deeply affected by the Vietnam War, and it really shows up in their movies. And because it was so catastrophic, I can't imagine what 2020 is going to trigger in filmmaking, because that's why I suspected the reemergence of the zombie genre imagined differently, because it's this contagious thing, it's this isolating thing. I can imagine it coming out, but in a way that you wouldn't expect it to. So it's something to look forward to, I guess. But it does have those ebbs and flows.
Yeah, some kind of... Yeah. Is a virus horror? You know, is outbreak horror?
Yeah, Contagion. Yeah, like they're
not horror, they're thrillers.
I think you'll get a take in the horror genre on what's happened, though.
Well, and often, you know, the zombie apocalypse is
based
a disease.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The T virus.
Yeah.
I still love you, Resident Evil.
She's doing a new, like...
I know.
What is it? Monster Hunter. Another game.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Mila Jovovich fan. We're lucky that this red curtain.
I'm gonna get you a shirt
that says
or a
"I
purse.
love Mila Jovovich."
No, just Lilu Multipass.
Yay! I'd wear it every day. Even when I was wearing another T-shirt, I'd be wearing it underneath. Yeah, I don't know. This movie was great though, and it's so fun to go back and revisit this stuff. I'd like to actually go back and do Scream, because I think that would be worth talking about in the same way. They almost go together in my mind. So, are they a pair? Not really. They're so different. But these kinds of movies, it's not comedy, outright comedy.
Well, Scream is not at all.
No, it really isn't. But it's not. Tucker and Dale is a criticism of the genre in its own way, but it's also just comedy.
Right.
It's funny. I love Alan Tudyk. And not everybody liked it, especially horror fan people, because it's not like Cabin in the Woods, where, you know, it doesn't really pay proper homage to the genre and whatever. So
it's just a straight up spoof.
Yeah, it's a spoof. And, you know, I think a really well done one. You know, I think it's better.
Fine, I'll watch it.
Yeah, do it. And, you know, but that's what I mean. Like, these films to do something like this well is hard. And it's not like, even like Scary Movie. Did you like the Scary Movies?
The first one, it was a nice novelty.
Sure.
It's hard to rewatch.
Yeah.
You know?
They don't hold up super
And
well.
I think I only watched one, maybe two.
And I think...
Oh, it was like 1 and 5 or something.
Yeah. Scream will probably hold up eternally.
Yeah, well, there's no, it's just acting.
Yeah.
And like good writing.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think this one will as well. Maybe the CGI will age.
No.
But,
yeah, exactly.
But even then, what it's about won't.
No.
Especially if you're aware of the genre. Yeah. I think people will probably forget about it a little bit unless you're a horror fan, though.
Well, it's not. It doesn't have the same weight as Scream. Like people don't know it, right?
No.
Like really, people don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Which is strange because Joss Whedon. I think he'd just done Marvel at the time. Oh, maybe that was just before, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, just before.
Big things coming for him. It's rich. But I think that's a good place to leave it at because, now we have to go and watch some of this. I think what would be great next to do is to either look into what we're doing now or to look farther back. Because I think it would be fun to go back and watch some from the Vietnam War era.
Sure.
And to do maybe to talk about
older ones we've done. Sure.
We've done a couple of older ones.
Yeah.
Because how far back have we gone? What's the oldest one?
Well, some of them were like newer ones, but they were set in the 70s.
Right,
things like that. Or 60s, depending which one we're talking about. Like Scary Stories was the one we did.
Right, Scary Stories.
It was the last one we did.
Guillermo del Toro has done a lot of things I love.
Yeah. Let's do Pan Labyrinth.
Yeah, we could do that.
My favorite horror
Your
movie.
favorite horror movie.
Yeah.
And that one, we'll do a double feature on that one.
Sure.
And because you haven't done, you haven't seen The Orphanage, have you?
I have.
Oh, you have?
I
Okay.
was stoned, so I'll have to rewatch it.
Because rewatch those and then just Wikipedia Spanish Civil War.
And there's The Boy. Is him as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a bit silly.
Brahms.
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 So those would definitely be worth watching because they have a lot to do with the Spanish Civil War. So
Right,
and I need to brush up on my Spanish history because I would really
they were having their own war while the rest of the world was.
Well, I feel like those
socialism.
Fascism.
Yeah,
They're
sorry,
both
fascism.
wrong. Yeah, they both turned out to not be the greatest ideas in that
Sorry,
context.
fascism. Spanish fascism or Spanish socialism?
I think it was
It was a bit of
little,
both.
I think it was a little bit of not really even socialism. I think they were leaning pretty hard communist.
Yeah.
And
okay.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a great. People were figuring out their politics. Which brings us to the end of 2020, where we figured out our politics.
Let's not stop.
No, we're in our happy little booth right now. We're not getting in there.
I mean, it's pretty red.
Yeah. Let's let the ancient ones just take us. Anyways, Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. As always, this is the Fear Itself podcast where we talk about horror and have fun with it. We'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.